Okay, we have most persons here. Shanae, turn on your camera. Shauna K, turn with your camera. Rashina.
Miss Grace, I'll know that I don't know. The tab is just not opening. It's not opening.
And Shanae, where is your camera? And Shanique. Okay. Okay, guys. Let's get started. Let's get started. Let me go ahead and try to share our screens. I don't know if if there are too many at one time or what. Okay, let me try to share our screen. Oh, I am not sure where our file is. Wow. Let me try again. I'm having trouble sharing our files. Wow. And what we mean by that is that it must be aligned. Okay, it must allow you to make a match between the organization's strategic objectives and what the system is going to measure, the type of performance the system is going to measure. So remember when we looked the last time at the 6 main purposes, one of the chief purposes was that the system must be strategic. So here we are again saying that it's pointless if you have a system that cannot measure the goals of the organization. So when we write objectives for persons in terms of what the performance is that is expected, the system must have a way to measure it. So we go back again to the end product, which is the performance appraisal. So when you have your performance appraisal, we are supposed to be able to measure your performance, and we'll get to a stage in the course where you see how the actual appraisal is designed. So the first thing we have to ensure is that in putting the system together, in coming up with that final tool, that final instrument, which is the performance appraisal instrument, that there is a match between what an individual is doing in the organization and what we have set up to measure during the appraisal. So the goals and objectives, the system should be able to allow you to state the goals and objectives and the outcomes, okay? So we say that it must have context congruence, meaning it's also supposed to be able to look at what is the environment and what is going to be required. And then we move to thoroughness. And when we speak about thoroughness, we speak about the fact that the system also should be able to measure all the major dimensions, the major responsibilities of the employees. And they should be evaluated for an entire period. The system should also allow for feedback. So whatever is to happen, the system must be thorough. It cannot be just a partial system measuring, say, for instance, we're only measuring like 2 months of the year. Most appraisal systems are going to measure 12 months, but they might be done twice for the year. Okay? So if you're not clear, please ask questions because that's why I'm here. Are we understanding what I'm saying?
Yes, miss.
Yes,
okay.
miss.
Okay.
Yes, miss.
And then we say the system must be practical. It must have practicality, meaning it should be good and easy to use. If you talk to many HR managers, they're going to tell you, boy, The performance system is burdensome. The performance system, and managers, supervisors will tell you the same thing. Performance takes too much work. It takes too much work. So even though it is going to take a lot of work in designing it, we must try to ensure that it is easy to use. It is a good system, everybody understands it, and it's easy to use. It will have what we call acceptability. It must also be meaningful, okay? By that we mean that it should only emphasize the functions that are under the control of the employee, okay? By that we mean a lot of times managers will add goals and objectives that are not necessarily in line with the strategic directions of the organization. So when we look at it, we again go back to the strategic congruence, and we go back to the fact that the system must be objective. Employees should understand the system. It should be meaningful to them. It should be a motivator. And it should provide for things like development of skills. So when we get to looking at the forms which I asked you to bring in, I'll give you a time by which we're going to bring those forms in, everybody, you're going to see that there's a developmental area on the form. And every good system that's designed should have an area in the appraisal where we talk about the skills and building the skills of the employees. Again, to be meaningful, the system should be able to be used for administrative decisions. So we go back again to those 6 purposes you saw before. And you remember one of those was administrative. So if the system cannot be used for administrative purposes, we say the system is not meaningful. It's not comprehensive enough, it's not meaningful. And then it must be very specific. We speak about specificity, meaning the employees should clearly be able to understand the expectations of their jobs. When a system is properly put together, the expectations that the organization sets out for each job should be clearly understood by the employees, as well as how to meet them. So as we go along, you're going to hear me speak about not just the setting of goals and objectives, but setting standards as well as part of the goal setting purpose. So that if I'm given a task, for instance, say I'm the records clerk, and I am told that I'm to file 25 files per day, or that all files are to be returned to the file room by a particular time, or they're to be returned to the cabinet. I could just put them back in the cabinet in no order, because guess what? No standard was given to me. No measure was given to me. So therefore, when the measure is going to be written for that particular task, you're going to put in there that they are to be not only returned within the time allotted, but they are to be accurately filed, so that an employee, the records clerk, would clearly understand what the expectations are about her job or his job and how to meet them. So we're telling you things must be accurate, they must be in by a certain time. You might even indicate that they're to be filed according to the catalog that has been set up for the system, and different things like that. So depending on what your task is, there must be a quality standard so that the employee understands clearly what is expected of them. And then lastly, when we come to the identification of effective and ineffective performance, you will come to learn about ratings and rankings, okay? And for those of you that have had your own appraisal done, you will see on your appraisal form a ranking, so that it might start with like unsatisfactory, and progresses all the way up to outstanding. So those ratings are used to help to identify effective and ineffective performance. So if you got a rating that was in the unsatisfactory box with a score that is also placed there, then you know that your performance is ineffective. Whilst if you got a score that was higher, maybe you got a satisfactory score, it's higher but still not good enough. But if you got a higher score, you know, that said good, or whatever the terminology is, because we have different forms of terminology that you'll come to learn about that we use when we do rankings and ratings. So in looking at setting up the system, all of these things have to be considered, so that at the end of the day, when you have designed that appraisal instrument, and you have also put in all the guidelines for the system looks like an ideal system. It looks like a good system. It's going to be usable. Everybody is going to understand it. There are some other things you'll do to ensure that people understand it. But basically, it is meeting the criteria or the guidelines that have been set out for a good system. So this is why we will be critiquing some of those forms to see, you know, how they measure up, etc. Next. Thank you. So we still continue. We're not done, because there are other things that have to be a part of the system. So we looked at the first 7. And you will notice that there are 15 things. And remember what I told you about lists in the first class. Remember the tips I gave you about lists. This is a very, very important list. And by the way, when you look at your text, this is one of the chapters that's very, very nicely written. Okay? And there is an expanded explanation. Okay? An expansion of even what I'm telling you in maybe more simplistic terms, okay, set out for you there. It's something you need to know. So number 8, we're saying that the system must be reliable. And when we say it must be reliable, we consider it to be free of error. Now, as I mentioned, I think last week, you will come to do a research course, and you're going to see reliability and validity again in your research course. And when we say something is reliable, it means that it has been properly designed so that it can be used by all the various users. And we start to look at other forms of reliability. We're saying it must have inter-rater reliability, which means that all persons across the organization that are using this tool should be able to use it. It should meet the criteria for all the users. Now, different goals and objectives are going to be set across the organization, but the way that the appraisal tool is set up, you're going to have an area for you to place your objectives, but the ranking and the ratings that are there and the other requirements of the appraisal process will be met by everybody in the organization. So we won't have 5 or 6 or 7 different appraisal tools. So we say then that if that is possible, then we have inter-rater reliability. Now, in some organizations, you might find that there might be a slight difference in the intervals that performance is measured. Because we find that, for instance, like in sales organizations or service organizations, they might decide to measure the performance more frequently. So they may decide that they're doing appraisals every 3 months instead of just the 6 months and 12 months appraisals. But the criteria of the system is still the same. The ranking system that is used will be still the same. What will differ is the timing, for instance, that has been set for the goals and objectives, meaning is somebody to do this within 3 months instead of within 6 months, or within, instead of within 12 months. But whatever happens, it will be 4 quarters and it's still going to add up to 1 year, because we measure performance. No matter what you do, you measure performance for an annual period, which would be 1 year. And when we speak of validity, well, let me just say something else about reliability. When we look at reliability as well, we look at what we call the internal consistency, which again is what I just explained. Chantal, I see your hand, I'll soon respond to you, which is what I also explained, because whatever you do, there must be consistency across the organization. And if we were to test it by using it in different parts, it should meet the criteria. So we also say that it's going to have reliability, it is going to have retest reliability. So if I took it up and took it to another part of the organization, we should get the same results. So sometimes we go and we retest the system, okay, to ensure that it is being used and that it is meeting the consistency, etc. Okay. Yes, Chantal?
Hi, Miss. Now, good evening. All right, so you were talking about standardization just a while ago, and you said it has to be the same across the board for all employees, right? That's what you said. I'm trying to see if I can, because what I'm understanding is that, because in my company, I work for a tech company, and ours is a little bit different, as in, if it's a case that we have one appraisal for the tech team, the ops team is a bit different because their deliverables are a bit different. So is that
Right.
something that you're now saying that everybody across the board is supposed to be getting? Okay.
No. What I'm saying to you is that the basic system, the ranking system, the rating system should be the same. So like you might use a number, say for instance, from 1 to 5, with 1 meaning unsatisfactory. Okay, we'll use what is called a Likert scale. You haven't done your research course yet, so you might not be so familiar with some of the terminology. But most of them have a ranking from 1 to 5, with 1 being unsatisfactory, 5 being outstanding. Okay, and we're saying that that scale of measurement should be the same across the organization.
Okay.
What is going to be different is the deliverables, like you said, because everybody cannot have the same deliverables. But for each deliverable, there has to be a standard, meaning how is this to be done? To what quality? But each individual, based on their job description, is going to have their own unique set of objectives set for them, objectives that are in keeping with whatever the strategic directions are of the organization. Now, when we get to the chapter on strategic planning, you'll understand the goal setting process a bit better. Okay, so when we speak about standards, okay, we speak about setting measurement, quality, etc., so that whatever the deliverable is, it's done to a particular specification, to a particular quality. But when I say that it's be able to be used across the organization, the system of measurement that is chosen should be able to be used across the organization. So whether you're in the ops team or whether you're in the sales team, a ranking of 1 to 5 in terms of rating your performance is going to be the same. And usually most measurements also, and we will be going into a chapter about measurement, most measurements are going to add up to 100. So like if you had 5 objectives, we might decide that we are giving 20 points to each objective, or some might be more important than others. So you might be giving 10 to some, or maybe 30 to some, whatever. But at the end of the day, when you add up those numbers, they must come to 100. And the scale is going to show you, and we're going to get to that in more detail. The scale is going to show you that if I got 40 points overall when my numbers were added out of 100. 40 is going to translate to a 1, which is unsatisfactory. So we're going to get into measurements and you're going to see how these scales are set. But when we say that it is to be reliable, it means that that form, that appraisal tool when it's designed and the criteria on the tool itself should be able to be used across the organization, regardless of what department you're in, etc. What's going to differ is the individual requirements for performance, the goals and objectives. So hopefully you're clearer now, Chantel. Anybody else not clear about this? Okay. So we go on to say that the system must also be, okay, Susan is saying she does over 150 PMAS every year. Now, Susan, what you mean that you do them? You are in HR, you mean that you are the receptacle for them because you don't have 150 employees under your supervision, do you, Susan?
No, miss, but I'm responsible for the processing of all the staff in my department. Yeah. Okay, okay.
So in the government services I mentioned in the first class, their performance management system is called a Performance Management Appraisal System with the short name of PMAS. Okay. Okay. So we say that the system must also be valid, meaning it is to measure what is important and only what is important and objective. For example, a lot of times managers will try to set objectives that may not be directly related to the job, but they have a personal interest in having something done, or they may have a personal bias, and you will come to the stage where we speak about rate of errors. So a simple example that I always give is, again, I go back to an administrative clerk who is asked to prepare a report. And that person is told that the report must have 4 copies. 1 copy is to be on pink paper, 1 copy is to be on yellow paper, and 2 white copies. Now, when the copy list is done, 2 of those copies, or the pink copy, is going to the immediate manager. The difficulty there is that the organization does not buy pink paper. So where is this administrative class clerk to get pink paper and yellow paper from? The organization does not buy pink paper and yellow paper. And the manager may say to the employee, well, I don't care where you get it from, but I want my copy on pink paper. And that is very unrealistic. So sometimes we set even some simple things that makes the non-achievement of the task possible. And those are biases. So we always have to caution that whatever you're going to measure in the system, what you're going to set up as far as how you measure performance or the performance that you're going to measure, it must be relevant to the job. So when we're setting goals and objectives, it must be relevant. So take, for instance, again, you may set up the system and you might say one of the criteria which we're going to measure is grooming. How important is grooming? You're going to take up time to measure grooming. You have a factory and you have 700 employees in there. Somebody is going to walk around and ensure that all of them are properly dressed. Now, it might be a case that yes, it could be valid in some cases, because if safety is important, then somebody wants to ensure that employees have on the proper safety gear, that sort of stuff. So we have to be careful, because we have to ensure that whatever we are measuring, there's a valid reason for it in somebody's performance. Whatever part of the performance the organization is going to measure, there needs to be a valid reason for it, okay? Now, we speak about inclusiveness, and inclusiveness has to do with communication.
Miss, you miss acceptability and fairness.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I skipped over acceptability and fairness. Going too fast. Let me back up. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. If you have a system that nobody wants to use, you will have wasted the organization's money. When we design a system or we redesign a system, it's good to do a pilot to ensure that everybody understands it, that again, it has reliability, it has validity, and we go back to the first seven items in that, you know, it's measuring what it has to measure, it's specific. So communication is very, very important. In designing a system, how you implement it, and we'll come to a whole chapter on implementation, is very important, because if the users of the system do not accept it, you will have wasted your money. And we say that it has to be fair, so that we allow in the redesign or in the pilot, we allow for input from the employees. So we, as I said, that's why it's important to pilot it. I remember when I first came back to Jamaica, one of the first consulting tasks I had when I started doing some consulting work, because when I came back, I also did consulting work in charge of a consulting arm of the organization that I was attached to. And I remember being asked to come in and look at a system in one of our major government agencies that they had spent a lot of money and brought in a consultant, and everybody refused to use the system. And it just sat there, no performance appraisals were being done, no goal setting was taking place. The whole process was just stagnant. And when I took a look at it, I could understand what had gone wrong, because some of the stuff there was not objective, that they were measuring was not objective. I could see areas where there could be bias. So nobody, apparently, I don't know if there wasn't a trained person on the staff who could recognize some of these things, but when they started to administer it, the employees had a lot of objections to it. And therefore, they were never ever able to implement the system. So that was quite a waste of money to the organization, because the system had to be redesigned, okay? So acceptability by the users, and to ensure that the system is fair. Again, it's measuring what it needs to measure, it's valid, it's reliable, is very, very important, okay? So I go back to inclusiveness, and inclusiveness means that we are going to allow the employees to give feedback about the system. So from time to time, you might do, as a part of an employee satisfaction survey, you may have an area on the survey that asks, you know, what person's impressions are of the performance management process and the system in the organization. Have any of you seen that on any of you have participated in an employment satisfaction survey within your organization?
Yes, miss.
Have you seen anything asking you about your appraisal process?
No, miss.
No, miss.
Okay. Well, when I put them together, I ensure that there is an area on communication, and there is an area asking about the appraisal process, whether you feel it's fair, whether your manager explains your goals and objectives to you, whether you understand the expectations of your job, etc. Okay? So it's a very good thing to do to ensure that this system, again, has acceptability and fairness as well. And then we speak about openness. Again, there should be guidelines and a process for feedback. In other words, I have seen systems where the employees are given a checklist, and they're to fill out what they did and what they didn't do and whatever, or the manager just meets with them and they fill out this checklist, whatever, but no feedback is given until that day when the appraisal is being done. And when that happens, we say the system is not an open system. Feedback is something that should be given on a regular basis by every supervisor to an employee. Okay? So, what is Karen saying here? Karen, I'm not sure what you're saying. Karen?
Miss, good evening. I was just saying that Lantira HR was a waste to some organization also because the implementation was poor.
Okay, that was a particular system?
Yes, miss, similar to HR Plus, some elements.
Okay. So there was very poor implementation of it?
Yeah, because it has 7 elements and some organization. I think about 2 or 3 organizations, government organization in Jamaica had it, but they didn't fully implemented it.
Yeah, I never came across that one. That's why I wasn't sure when you said Lantira what you were speaking of. I haven't come across that.
I did grad internship at PCJ, which is now no more, and they had that system there.
Okay, so that was part of their human, the Hermes system, the human resource management information system. Now,
so
one of the things that's happening with some of those systems, because I'm actually examining about 5 systems now for a client, is that some of them have a performance menu. But when we look at it, it is not practical. The things that it is measuring, it is assuming that everybody is doing the same job, similar to what what's the name of the student that had just mentioned asking about standards? What's your name again? I'm not seeing your name on your profile. Chantal. Anyway, Chantal. Yeah. Okay. Some of those systems that are included as a part of the Hermes system aims to just have a standard process for every employee. So the goal setting aspect of it sometimes cannot be incorporated into the system. And therefore, I do recommend to my clients that when they're buying a Hermes system, that they not do that, because they not take that menu as part of the system, because the system should be designed to fit the organization and the organization's type of work, the industry that the organization is in. So I much prefer to see the systems designed to be specific to the type of organization and the type of work the organization does, etc., so that it can be meaningful. Okay. And then we say that it must have correctability. And by that we mean there must be a process in place by which things can be corrected, whether it be the system, the system should not be what we call stagnant. You don't just put in a system and leave it there forever. As the organization grows or something changes within the organization, take for instance what is happening with COVID now. The process to do appraisals is going to have to change because many of you are working virtually, okay? And the supervisor cannot observe you each day. Therefore, the collection of information on your performance may have to be different, which means that the existing system and even how the goals are set, etc., may have to change. So the system should have some flexibility so that if you have to make a change to it, you can make a change. You don't have to abandon the whole system, okay? Also, as part of correctability, there should be an appeals process for employees, so that if you had your appraisal done and you're not in agreement with your score, you should be able to have that appealed and be able to have it corrected if something is wrong, or understand what went wrong with the process. So as part of correctability, the appeals process is also important. So two things should happen with correctability: the system and any system errors or any changes to the system, we should be able to correct them. And we should also have an appeals process so that if something went wrong in the appraisal, there is a professional practice in place by which there can be an agreement between the manager and the employee. So that appeals process is something that has to be formally set up. All these things, you know, are going to come up again as we go along in more detail, okay? And then we spoke about standardization already, in that performance must be evaluated consistently across time and place. And we also have to ensure that training is provided so that this can take place. So managers, supervisors, persons who are appraising performance should be trained so that we have consistency in how things are done as far as, you know, measuring and monitoring an employee's performance. And then naturally, every system should be ethical, okay? Meaning it should be perceived as being fair by all the employees. Now, later on, you're going to learn about justice, and you know that word, right? Because our Jamaican people love to call for justice, right? So you are going to learn about the different forms of justice that must be in place in order for the system to be ethical. So if you want to read ahead, you can go and look on what is meant by distributive justice, procedural justice, interactional justice, because it's going to come up. It's going to come up, and it's also going to come up in your staffing class, because justice is a very, very important matter when we deal with people and people's performance and just the processes that we use in handling persons in an organization from the start of recruiting all the way down to when we measure their performance, measure and manage their performance. So we have to ensure that the rules that we put in place for the use of the system are very clear and understood by all. Any questions, any sharing?
Yes, Miss. You said distributive justice, procedural, and what?
Interactional justice. You can look those up. They're going to be in your book. And remember to use that other textbook that I told you to. It has a nice chapter explaining some of that as well. The Know It textbook. Okay?
Yes, Miss.
So
Thank you.
don't forget about that. Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, Miss. Good evening.
Who is this? Michelle? Okay.
Yes. So, Miss, at my organization, we use success factors. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
So
the standard. Go ahead.
We wanted a system that would cover all aspects of HR. And so we started using success factors since last year. Now, since last year, I have also been assisting with learning and development, which is really responsible for performance. And when I look at all these 15 characteristics, I believe success factors covers all except for practicality, where you mentioned that, you know, the system, it needs to be user-friendly and, you know, basically practical. I realized that a lot of employees reach out to me like very regular, especially when it's time to input their goals or when it's time for the managers to complete the managers review. And some feedback that I do receive from managers and employees is that it's very thorough, which should be a characteristic of the system itself. There are a lot of stages as it regards to the entire performance review process. So with success factors, you must input your goals, It is good in a sense that the goals must be added up to 100%. So if you input your goals and the weight is not adding up to 100%, it alerts you, it lets you know each step of the process. It will inform the relevant stakeholders. So it will let the employee knows that, you know, your DPR, your performance review has been sent to the manager. It notifies the manager, it notifies me, who would be the calibrator or the calibration facilitator rather. So it's very good, it's very reliable. But the managers complains to me daily because they're questioning the fact that why is it that after I have the discussion, I need to, it goes to the employee to sign off, then it comes back to me again to sign off. They just think that the process is too long and the system is not so user-friendly because of the many stages within our performance management system.
Okay, thank you for that sharing.
You're
you're using an automated system?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And you see, you find that the automated system sometimes, a lot of persons are finding it a bit cumbersome. Unfortunately, in some organizations, because of the size of the organization and the geographical spread of the organization, and if you were a multinational, I'm not sure which company, you know, what type of company you're with. Huh?
Digital.
So right. So you see, they're a multinational, and you're going to find that with the multinationals, a lot of times they will use the automated system because head office may not be, head office for Jamaica might be here, but it mightn't be the regional office. The regional office might be in Trinidad or somewhere else. So the process, the responsibility and accountability for the process rests with the regional office. And in order to have that flow of information across borders, a lot of times the multinationals are using an automated system. You'll find that for some of the foreign agencies that are operating here, sometimes they never ever see the person who is really appraising them because it's all plugged into the automated system and then relayed to the office that represents the region, etc. Now, in terms of the signing and stuff, we're going to come to learn that the employee signature on the document is very important. However, the employee signature does not signify that the person agrees. And this is why, for correctability, there should be an appeals process in place, because the employee signature is not to signify that the person agrees with the appraisal. It's only supposed to signify that the appraisal was carried out. And it has to be signed. In some cases, the system might have what is called a reviewer as well. Even after it is signed by the supervisor, the immediate supervisor, and the manager, it may go to another person for signature as well, who is called the reviewer. Right, and that reviewer is going to ensure that what was done was fair. Okay, and if it is not fair, it is going to come back, and that is a very unfortunate situation. We will talk a bit more, and you can remind me later in the course to talk a bit more about that, because anytime it has to come back from the reviewer as being an unfair appraisal, that is a very bad situation and has a lot of repercussions. But managers overall complain that the system takes a lot of time. And you have to remember that when you elect to have a position of leadership, or you're in, as we refer to all leadership as supervisory management, you take on a lot of work. And it goes back to the old saying that heavy is the head that wears the crown. Because there are certain things that you have to do. You have to be fair to the employees. Therefore, the whole matter of performance management takes a lot of time. If you don't want to take care of people, do not accept a position of leadership. Because in taking care of the persons that work with you, and nobody works for you, those days are gone. They work with you. It takes a lot of time, and you have to be fair. You have to be fair. So I know you're going to get always complaints because persons don't want to spend the time to manage performance properly. And most people think that it should be just a once a year thing and we don't have to even do anything in between. And at the end of the year, I just have to fill out these forms and they have to be signed, and I don't have to be accountable for anything that's going on the form. I don't have to be accountable for my employees' performance, etc.
True. And another thing as well, Miss, with success factors, what it allows is for the managers to, it holds the managers accountable to ensure that they're having sessions with their direct report. So each time you meet and you provide feedback or you plan on how this person can improve or whatever the case is, you are allowed to input that information so that if anything comes up, then we are able to go back to that system, and they don't like that because they just want to have a one session or they don't want to have any feedback at all.
They don't want to do coaching. They don't want to do coaching. And coaching is also another aspect. You will see that this program is very robust. If you've been looking at your textbook, you know, and even looking at your slides, you'll see that this is a very comprehensive course because performance management is a very robust system. Okay, so let's move on. Next, Misty. Next. Did I lose Miss Thomas? Wow. Whoa, 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 whoa. What problems are we having? Miss Thomas? We're frozen in time. Oh, let me see. Okay, there she is. Okay, now I have created for you a small chart on fairness. Okay, this is not in your textbook in this way, but I wanted you to be able to make the connection because it's going to affect a lot of what we are doing. Okay, so I've created this little chart for you to kind of simplify why we will be talking about the different types of fairness. Okay, so as you look at the chart, as you look at the chart, in designing the system, the procedural fairness is going to be very, very important. Okay, because the rules and regulations that are set for the system must be objective. The rules and regulations that we set in terms of how performance is to be carried out has to be objective. So the importance of having procedural fairness is also to assist with development of the employees. Okay, and we say that it has implications in that it will give the manager an opportunity to participate in developing the system. It ensures the standards are consistent when you're evaluating the employees, and it's going to help to minimize rating errors and bias. Later on, we'll be talking about what these rating errors are because they're very serious activities and have a lot of repercussions when they're committed by the appraiser. Interpersonal fairness, it's important that managers use the system properly. Okay, you just spoke, Michelle just spoke about the ability to give feedback. And I just spoke about the ability to challenge the evaluation, which is the appeals process. And also, we insist that in giving feedback, that it is given with respect and courtesy. We have seen situations where persons do not put a private space together to do an employee's appraisal. Okay, they'll do it in an open area in earshot of other employees, and that is not to be done. It's a very private conversation and it's a very confidential conversation. So we say that interpersonal fairness has to be in place, and we have to ensure that persons are using the system properly and that we get the desired outcomes. Okay, so your whole approach to carrying out interpersonal communication is very important. Otherwise, you're going to be accused of unfairness. And then when we look at outcome fairness, we are really looking at the judgments that we make with respect to what we want the system to do, okay? And therefore, you have to ensure that we communicate the expectations properly to the employees. You know, you have a job description, it needs to be properly explained to the employees. When we set the goals and objectives, we need to explain the standards, explain what is expected, you know, how this task is to be done, by what time it is to be done, etc. And then if the system is tied to rewards, it's very, very important that we also communicate that. Meaning, for instance, it mightn't be monetary rewards, it might be psychological rewards, like for instance, the recognition system that you see in an organization where somebody is like employee of the month or employee of the quarter or whatever. That's a form of recognition. If it is going to be tied to a performance incentive, it needs to be communicated. You notice that bonuses going away at the end of the year, and what you get out of a pool, if your organization has a pool, a lot of times has to do with your performance score. So like even going back to the employee of the month or employee of the quarter, or whatever, this is one of the criteria that you should be using in selecting that person. What is the person's performance like? Okay, so it's very, very important that we recognize that there are different approaches, and employees will perceive these things as unfair if these forms of justice and fairness are not in place. So as I said to you, you're going to read about these forms of justice, and they tie into these forms of fairness as well. Now, in other countries, these things are very important because persons will sue an organization if they feel that they've been unfairly treated in many, many ways. And you're going to see the same thing over in staffing again. So the legal implications for these are very great as well. Next. Thank you. Okay, now it's important to note that when we do set up the performance system, it also integrates with other HR activities, okay? When properly used, the system provides information for training, and I'm sure you can imagine how. How does the system provide information for training?
Help to identify performance gaps.
Right. It will identify performance gaps, and you heard me speak about the developmental area on the form. Some forms will have both a developmental and a remedial area, and we'll talk more about that. But the results from a person's performance appraisal, you're supposed to look and see, you know, where somebody needs skill development or further development. And it's not only for poor performance, it's also for good performance in terms of looking ahead, you know, doing future training as well. I've told you that it will provide the information for performance and compensation, because as I said, no, a lot of companies are going away from giving bonuses and they look at performance incentives based on your performance scores, individual performance scores. Workforce planning.
Miss, just a moment, sorry. For the performance, for the performance incentive, what would that entail?
Well, what is going to happen is that the rankings and the ratings from the system will be tied into a compensation plan. So like for instance now, if you got an unsatisfactory score, you most likely would not get a performance incentive, meaning monetary. Depends on how the company has set up the incentive program. But some companies now, as I said, will not give the bonus again. They'll set aside a pool of money, and what you get out of it as an individual will have a direct link to the score that you have gotten for your performance for the whatever the review period is. So if it was half year, or if it was the annual review, take for instance, they might say that if you have an unsatisfactory score, you earn no performance incentive. If you have a good score, you might earn 10%, okay, out of the incentive pool, etc. So the company will link it with the compensation plan. So it's very, very important that in designing the system, again, and you go back to the 6 purposes, that you decide whether the system is going to be used also to help manage compensation. Because you can't just design a system, don't know where the link is to compensation, and then get up and then say, I'm just going to use this now, this appraisal, and decide who gets what. So it's a systematic process. Okay.
Okay.
So, workforce planning is very important, and workforce planning is going to come in as a very big topic in staffing. But remember, I told you that all your courses hinge together, and here we have performance management linking with workforce planning, meaning when we get the results of an individual's performance, and if it says that this person has a score of 90 out of 100, which means that the person is more than meeting the expectations, is maybe bordering on being outstanding, we begin now to look at these persons for the future, and we look at succession planning. So the company would have had a workforce plan, meaning they have decided now, based on the strategic goals, that over the next 5 years, for instance, they're going to need 25 more engineers, they're going to need 10 more project managers, etc., etc. They have X amount of persons retiring. All that would have been in this workforce plan, which is done over in staffing. Okay, so the workforce plan itself is done over in staffing. So now they're going to look for input into the skills inventory for the organization. So they're going to look at the results of the performance evaluations to see who's doing well, who could be considered in the succession plan. That's another thing. Who could be considered over the next 3 years to maybe assume a position, or we have a big project coming up in the next year. Do we have the skills in-house? Who's performing well, etc. So this is why when you go back again to the 6 purposes and you look at documentation, the documentation purpose and the informational purpose, it's important, because the company, if they have set up the system properly, and if they have set up their internal administration of the system properly, all this information is going to feed into a lot of different areas. But you need to know, when you're setting up the system, what are they going to require of the system? What can I pull from the system? In other words, you can't have a system and you all of a sudden want to pull a particular report, and you can't pull it because the system was not set up to provide that kind of information. So this is why from the ground up, you have to look at all these things. So the same thing happens with recruitment and hiring. We look at the performance, especially performance of persons who were newly hired, okay, to see whether they're doing well or not. And we use the performance, the results of the appraisals, to see how have they done after the first year. You also use it immediately to decide whether to confirm somebody after the probationary period. Remember, When you hire somebody new, the law says you have a probationary period that you may apply of 3 months, can be extended to 6 months. Now, at the end of the probationary period, you're supposed to have done a performance appraisal so that you can see whether you can confirm this person in the position. Because remember, until somebody is confirmed in a position, they earn no benefits. Yes, they'll get like vacation time, you know, 1 in every 22 days after they've worked 110 days. And you'll come to learn these things, those specifics of the labor market, you'll come to learn in Dr. Taylor's course on labor relations. So we don't go into that in detail in this course. But it's important that the results from the performance appraisals be funneled over into those decisions. Now, when it comes to hiring, we go back now to staffing and we decide and we look at the sources from which we hired these persons. Meaning, did we get good recruits? Are those good sources where we're getting our hires from? You know, so for instance, if you hired 10 persons in the last year, okay, I see your hand, Rashina, soon answer you. If you hired 10 persons in the last year, and at the end of the year now, based on the performance appraisal, you have only retained 3. Okay, you couldn't confirm 7 because they never became productive employees. You must go back now and look at where you hired these persons from, or what went wrong in the hiring process. Was our selection tool not a good selection tool? Is it a leadership problem? What is it? Because it's costly. So the performance appraisal is very, very important, especially at the probationary period. Many organizations, though, locally, are not doing performance appraisals at the end of a probation period. They're not setting goals and objectives for the new employees. And this is why sometimes they are also having to extend the performance, extend the probation to 6 months. Because the manager didn't set any goals and objectives, all of a sudden he or she sits down and can't measure the employee's performance. Because they never provided any guidance, they never set any goals and objectives for that new employee. So one of the chief reasons for extending somebody's probation I'm finding locally is because a manager didn't do what they were supposed to do at the beginning. Yes, Rashina?
Yes, miss. In my youngest days, I'm still young, but when I was much younger, just left after leaving college, I went to work at one of the government ministries, and at 6 months, we were supposed to do the performance appraisal thing. And my coworker said to me that the directors say she doesn't take on anybody after 6 months. You have to basically kiss her. That's what Jamaica would say, for her to take you on after 6 months. But anyway, she did not. And then she let us went through another performance appraisal again, another 6 months that would make a year. And she would find every single thing to say to you, not to put you on staff. And we were all young at the time, early 20s, 19, thereabout. And a position came up that one of the it was a records clerk. She was qualified for the position because in records clerk, they have 3 levels, ring 1, ring 2, and ring 3. And she knew the job thoroughly. And when asked if she would promote that individual to the ring 3, given that she was the most experienced person, she said, no, I can't promote her to that. She's going to get too much money. She's too young to get too much money. And she did not. And what happened is that she hired someone from outside of the ministry for that position, and that same girl had to be training that new person for the position until she got a little demotivated and left the ministry. But my point is that she did not want to put us on staff until 1 year, and I heard that it was a routine thing. She does not put new recruit after 6 months on staff, especially female, because she had a more liking for males. And she said it out loud. She had a preference for males and females. So once a female in Jamaican in Jamaican kind of vernacular, she gave a basket for carry water. And I think that yes, it was hard. And
very toxic environment.
It was, and as a young lady at the time, it left a bitter taste in my mouth because for director, we didn't expect a director to be so toxic towards us as young people who we were just left school and trying to earn a living and thing. And she would not, and I heard that eventually that a lot of the other directors did not know what she was doing as well. So my point is that is one of the reasons why I said after leaving university, I would never want to work in the government sector again because of that one bad experience. We waited 1 year just to go on staff.
Well, and one of the things you have to I need to point out about the government system though. The government has a slightly different system in terms of how you are confirmed in a job. And somebody might be able to remind me because sometimes I forget, but it is not the same as the private sector. Government has a set of their own, what is called staff orders. And when you're first hired, there is an extra step in there because you go through probation, you go through confirmation, I think, and then you have to go through what is called appointment. Now, one of the problems I think they're having now, even with trying to rationalize the public sector, is that many persons, just like you are saying, never moved to the appointment stage. And when they look on the books now, they're having a lot of persons who, sadly enough, are going to come out now in this rationalization without a pension, without anything. And this is why the rationalization is taking so long, because I don't think the government really knows how many employees they have, because nobody was following up the system. So like a manager that you spoke about, got away with a lot of things and would have all these employees. And basically what it amounts to is you're a temporary employee and you have persons that may have spent 10 and 15 years in the public service and are still temporary employees because nobody was there to monitor the system, etc. Now that, and as of this week, by the way, you probably saw government's announcement that they're starting the centralization of HR. So hopefully going forward in the future, but it will take many years. But you're going to have persons who will be outplaced or made redundant in this public sector and will be coming out of there without any pension, anything, because they were never ever appointed. Because they have what is called staff orders. They observe certain parts of the regular labor law, but they have their own basic labor law, which is referred to as the staff orders. So it's kind of sad. So let me deal with the last item, which is talent management. Remember again, if you go back to the 6 purposes, you had a developmental purpose. And the information from the system should be used to help to manage the type of skills that exist in the organization, be able to help with looking at where the skills are needed, what skills exist, and we encourage the organizations to develop what is called a skills bank. So they can also predict future needs, not just for the individual, but future needs for the organization. Okay? Okay, so this brings us to the end of our first module. Any questions before we move into another area? We're going to move into another area. Any questions? No? Okay. So I know we're covering a lot of stuff, but it's very, very important. So now we begin to look at the processes, or the processes as you may call it. Sometimes I flip because, you know, after living away for 30 years, sometimes I'm with an American pronunciation that it just happens automatically. So don't pay attention to me sometimes if I say funny things, okay? I notice we have a lot in the chat. Let me take 1 minute and see if anybody's asking anything there. Okay, good comments, okay. Okay, good comments. Susan says, yes, it happens all the time. Yep. And Jennifer says, yes, what I told you about the system is correct. Okay, so basically lots of things in the chat. Okay. Okay, so we now look at the performance management process. We have 11 modules in this course, and that's why we can't afford to dilly-dally in the evenings. Okay, so we now look at the performance management process. Now remember, when we started at the beginning, I told you that it is an ongoing process. Okay, performance is not something that should just take place once for the year. And as we look at these components, they're all related to each other, and poor implementation of any of them has a negative impact on the performance system itself. It's very important that you know these because they're going to live with you throughout the course. And it's very important that you be able to distinguish between them, okay? So let us discuss each one. What you should keep in mind about these is that overall, it involves considerations about the results and the behaviors and the development of the employees. Okay, remember, you know, why we have a performance management system is to ensure that persons are contributing productively to the goals of the organization. Many organizations fail, and sometimes it's after they fail when they go back and they say, but my God, we had 500 employees, but only 200 of them were really contributing anything to the organization. Okay, so it's very important. Gone are the days where you can just run a company, even if you're a small business. Worse if you're a small business and you have a small company, you're a nice little entrepreneur and you have a company with 10 employees or 6 employees and you don't know what each one is doing. You cannot survive. You're wasting the company's revenues and you can never go forward. You can never grow. So it's very, very important that every organization put in a performance system. No matter how small you are, it doesn't have to be a very complex system, but you must have a way in which you know who's contributing what. So if you even have 6 employees, you can put in a simple system that allows you to know who is contributing what, how, when, and where, and what is quality. Okay, because quality is very, very important in everything you do. Okay, quality is extremely important. So here we go again, 6 things. Okay, the first one is the prerequisites, the second one is performance planning, the third one is performance execution, the fourth is performance assessment, the fifth is the review of performance, and the sixth is performance renewal and contracting. So next, please, let us start by discussing each of them. So when we speak, and by the way, I'd like a little more participation than what is happening. Okay, I'm going to flick and see how many of you have gone to sleep. Okay, because I'm not hearing a sound. Okay, what was that comment? Somebody was just commenting, you really want a performance management system that allows us to appraise our managers. Okay, okay, Karen. You'll come to the types of systems later down, and there is such a there is such a system, as Errol is now indicating, called the 360-degree system. But we will talk about that later because that system has many implications. Okay? So Chantel is saying that she has a 360 system. We will come to that. Let us not deal with 360 now because there's a lot to learn about the different type of systems. Okay, so let us go back to where we were. And we're looking at the first item, which are the prerequisites, meaning what has to be known, what has to be done before you can design a system. What are the bits of information that you need to gather to help you so that you can design a system that is aligned to the organization's goal, a system that meets the organization's needs, a system that's going to allow it to measure the outcomes based on the type of industry they are and stuff. So the first thing we say to you, if you are the consultant that goes in, you need to have knowledge of the organization's mission and its strategic goals. Now, sometimes you walk into a building and you see a nice statement on the wall that says our mission. And you see they say the mission is to serve their customers, to offer high quality customer service, to be honest, to be this, that, whatever, whatever. And in some cases, you'll also see the vision statement. And it is also important too that if there's a vision statement that you ask the company, what is its vision? Where does it intend to be in 5 years? So that you also look at the time of the system. Can you design a system that will stand up and, you know, allow for them to change to get to where they want to get to in 5 years? Okay, so knowledge of the organization's mission and its strategic goals. Now, how are you going to know about the strategic goals? You're going to have to ask them if they have a strategic plan, or some of them might say to you they have a business plan. But I'm sadly going to tell you that here locally, the large organizations will have a strategic plan. But you're going to find that small and medium organizations don't have a strategic plan. So if you're the consultant, you kind of end up in an indirect way gathering enough information that you can actually say to them, it seems to me as if this is your strategic direction. And you need to do that in order to get verification, because if not, you're going to design a system that doesn't link to what they do, and it becomes unusable. So if you're going to a small organization and they don't have a strategic plan, you might very well have to ask the questions that will allow you to understand what this organization is all about. Okay. So because one of the important things of the organization is to also know about the types of jobs that the organization has. You can't set up somebody, I've forgotten who it was, spoke about the characteristics that they're using in the system. And when she spoke about characteristics, when we refer to characteristics, and you're going to hear that again because, you know, we're moving towards these things, you're going to hear whether you're going to measure things like teamwork, whether you're going to measure initiative, you're going to measure grooming, you're going to measure innovativeness, etc. Those are characteristics. So you have to know about the jobs so that you can decide now what will be the priority characteristics that are important to be measured by the system. So you'll ask them, for instance, if they have job descriptions. And some of the small companies might say to you, boy, we don't have any job descriptions. So all of a sudden you find yourself now having to do almost a mock-up to understand what is the job and what would be the behaviors that would be required for that job to be performed successfully. Because you have to remember that one of the most important objectives of a performance management system is to enhance the employees' contributions to the goals of the objective. It's important that the system provides clarity for the employees about the strategic directions and about what are the tasks that they have to do and how they should be done. And you'll hear people speaking about the KSAs. You know what the KSAs are? You know what the KSAs are?
Knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Right. So
sometimes other characteristics.
Pardon me?
And sometimes other characteristics is added on to that.
Characteristics. So you can't set up the measurement, what is to be measured in the system in terms of the employees' performance, okay, according to the goals and objectives, if you don't know about the types of jobs that the organization has. So that is the block that we speak about as being the prerequisite. Setting the stage is the first thing. So that's the prerequisites. One of the important prerequisites also, and you can tie this back to Mrs. Lewis when you go back to class again, is that we also ask whether, depending on the size of the organization, whether a job analysis has been done. Because the job analysis helps you also to understand the duties, etc. Okay? It helps you to understand the cases and the job description. So job analysis, especially in the large organizations, becomes very important. Now, as I said to you, in the small organizations, you're not going to find some of these things. So you're going to have to find a way to create and to pull the information that you'll need so that you can make these objective decisions when you're suggesting a design to the system. Okay? Next. So item number 2 on that ladder that you saw before was looking at performance planning. Now, when we speak about performance planning, we have to decide what it is that we want to measure in the system. Okay? Are we going to look at the results, meaning the objectives of the employees, the performance standards, their accountabilities? Are we going to look at how the job is done? What are the behaviors we want? Okay, so we go back again to even the hiring in terms of what sorts of persons have we hired? What kind of behaviors? Do we want people who are innovative? Do we want people who are creative? Do we want people who can work on their own initiative? What kind of competencies should these persons have? And a lot of things are now considered competencies, and therefore they fall into behaviors. Like, for instance, the ability to communicate is a competency. The ability to take initiative is a competency. And we need to look at the behaviors because the behaviors are critical to the achievement of a job. Attitude is very important. You look at a lot of times organizations and they have a lot of people, but the behaviors are not contributing to the success of the organization. Persons are lazy, they don't take initiative, they don't observe rules, regulations, etc. So you're going to have to ask the committee, and most times when we're looking at putting a system together, one of the first things we do is to maybe form a committee, internal committee, so that some of these questions can be answered. And we'll say to them now, what type of behaviors are important to the organization? What type of competencies are important to the organization? And out of that now, you're going to develop some of the characteristics. So we might say initiative is important, so that becomes a characteristic. They might say teamwork is important as a behavior. That becomes a characteristic. They might say innovativeness. We want a strategic thinker. We want a strong communicator, that sort of stuff. So the base information is critical. And then we asked the question as to whether there's going to be a developmental plan. Will the organization, put a developmental plan in place so that persons can be allowed to improve? And of course, improvement leads to achievement of goals. So again, that's another question. Are you going to use the developmental purpose? Now, we have seen organizations that only use the system for developmental purposes. It is not linked to compensation or anything. It is purely linked to development and behaviors and results, but it does not link to compensation. Okay, so there's no incentive. They're using it purely for administrative purposes as well, to ensure that administrative decisions that might be made about promotions or layoff or terminations can be made. But it's important to find out if they're going to use it for training purposes. Therefore, you have to plan to have an area of the system that works as a development plan, okay? So we need to identify all of those things, okay? And then when the process gets done, then we can begin now to look towards design and development. The other third ladder looks to whether the organization is going to be committed to the whole matter of goal setting, okay? Whether the organization is also going to be committed to providing feedback and coaching. So you're going to have to indicate again whether the system, then you will have a recommendation that says, for instance, as an objective for each manager must provide employees with coaching and feedback, okay? So you make that as a rule, you put that as an instruction. How is the employee going to communicate with the supervisor? All those things you're going to look at. And how are you going to use the data that comes out of the performance? So we look at, for instance, are you going to use it for the informational purpose? Are you going to use it for the documentational purpose? Are you going to use it for the administrative purpose? Are you going to fully link it to the strategic purpose, etc.? And then the last part, the last item in the performance execution is the performance review. Are you going to put a procedure in as to how performance reviews will be conducted by the organization? Because the system can't just stand on its own, it has to have rules, regulations, guidelines, etc. Ownership. Next. Next, okay. So we go to number 3, which is performance execution, okay? Performance execution, which is number 3. And we look at what will the supervisor have responsibility for. Very, very important. Okay, what is the role of the managers and the supervisors when we put the system together? Are they going to be required to observe performance on a daily basis or weekly basis, or what are the guidelines we're going to give them in terms of how they observe performance? And this is important because a supervisor who knows little about an employee's performance cannot do a factual appraisal. And therefore, what comes out of the appraisal is subjective. You see, people have a score of 90, but when you go and look at the goals and objectives, maybe only 40% of the person's goals and objectives were achieved for the year, because the supervisor really didn't know anything, and it's almost like somebody, as we would say in local language, fudging the scores. Okay, and this is why it is so important for the system to be monitored, because a lot of times when we look at the outcomes and we look at the scores, they don't match. Okay, so we have to decide how are we going to ensure that this type of behavior does not take place. Okay, so you will come to hear that we will put in certain things like we suggest the use of a critical incidents log. So when we get to that, you will understand why we're putting that in, because observance of performance and documentation of performance is very, very important. Okay. Each organization, and this is touching over on your labor laws course, each organization under the labor laws of Jamaica is supposed to have a disciplinary code. Okay? And the disciplinary code requires that, and it's a progressive code. It requires that if somebody is not performing, the first warning should be verbal, the second warning should be written, the third warning may lead to suspension. Different types of performance activities have different levels to the code, meaning if I stole money, I'm not going to go through progressive discipline. That is immediate termination. So when you look at the disciplinary code, all of the occurrences that could happen are usually set out. The Labor Department has a basic disciplinary code, but organizations are allowed to build on that disciplinary code because there might be activities that are unique to your company or to your industry, so that you will build the code so that by law it's also a legal document, because that is what you should use as guidance in disciplining an employee in terms of taking the disciplinary step. Therefore, if the system does not allow for proper documentation, and we go back to the administrative purpose, then you're going to find that the organization's ability to implement discipline is greatly affected. The organization's ability to terminate or to do layoffs will have legal implications. So we have to look at the information again that's going to come out of the system, but the supervisor's observations is critical, because if you are a supervisor and you're not observing somebody's performance properly, you cannot do a factual performance appraisal, nor can you do an objective warning or administer objective discipline. Okay? The system should be able to be updated, meaning that each year when we set goals and objectives, that we're able to adjust whatever the standards are, etc., and the accountabilities according to how the goals and objectives may change in the organization. Okay? But we also tell you that there must be a proper process in place by which this is carried out. These are not things that every manager and supervisor in the organization can just get up and go and do. So we will also have to put in levels of accountability in terms of who is responsible for signing off on goals and objectives, etc., etc. Feedback, we have spoken a lot about feedback, okay? And coaching is one of the elements of feedback. So we will also decide whether we're going to make coaching a requirement of all managers and supervisors. Resources, we need to ensure that persons are able to perform because they've been given the necessary resources. So like, for instance, you can't tell somebody that we're going to put up the performance system on the computer system for everybody to access. And therefore, everybody will be able to look at the guidelines of the system, because you're going to set up a whole set of guidelines like a manual. And yet, some employees have no access to computers. So we'll have to look at those impacts as well. How many persons in the organization may be impacted by not having a particular resource? Can the system work well? Or are we going to have problems? Sometimes persons may be working out in the field and are not accessible, or they cannot access information readily. So you'll have to decide, how do we manage those employees when it comes time for appraising performance? Okay. Also, in terms of skills to handle the performance management system, whether we're going to have training in place so that persons can you know, learn how to use the system, as well as when we have the developmental part of the system, and we recommend training, how are we going to go about that training? Is it in-house training, or we're going to acquire training? Okay. And then finally, how are we going to reinforce behaviors? If there's negative behavior, is it the organization's disciplinary code that ties in with the performance system? Or how are we going to communicate it? Is the supervisor required again to give feedback to communicate it? Any questions? I have a feeling a lot of you have just kind of faded away because I can't see the full screen, but I can still see what's going on. Periodically, I will scroll to see what's happening, but I am concerned about the level of participation. I spoke about that last week, and I'm going to tell you again that you cannot not participate in this class. So for many of you that in your easy chair at home and just putting your head back and resting and feel that you have all the slides, so you don't have to ask any questions or add anything, you know, we've heard some very good expressions of various experiences, and you are all supposed to share. So I'm concerned about your level of participation. It's the same set of persons asking the questions. Okay, so please wake up. If you need to drink some water or drink something, please do. Okay, because you need to participate. You can't be just the same little group of persons asking any questions, etc. Because I'm going to move fast, you know. So if you don't ask any questions, I'm going to assume that you understand what I'm telling you and that transfer is taking place. Okay, so please. And those of you that still don't have on the camera, please turn it on, because I can see those that don't have on the cameras. Tiffany, you don't have on your camera. Shaniki, still don't have on your camera. Okay, Prendergast, you still don't have on your camera. Okay, yes, Latoya?
Miss, as a side note, what will a staff member do in a case where the performance management system is not up to the standard, then it doesn't meet these requirements?
What will the employee do?
Yes, yes. For example,
the employee can't do anything. The managers are the major users, and they should be able to give feedback if they figure that a part of the system isn't working or something in the system is not objective, etc. But this is why the employee satisfaction survey is important. It is important that it should have a question area about performance management. And from time to time, the organization should survey as to whether the system is working or not. Yes, Latoya?
No, Miss, I'm just thinking that, okay, so for my situation, we're always asked to give feedback, but nothing changes. And how it happens is that the staff member does their evaluation and then it is discussed with the manager.
You do a self-assessment first.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to come to see how that fits in. You do a self-assessment and then it's used as a part of your appraisal.
Right.
It is supposed to help the manager to prepare for the discussion with you.
Okay, Miss.
So what parts of the system you feel is not okay?
Well, I mean, you would point out areas because there is an area which speaks about, you know, what resources you need, what training you need, and you will put it on there year after year, and nothing happens.
Yeah, it's a common problem, but your manager is the person who is responsible to see that if those resources are needed, that they're provided. So it goes back to the manager and the ability of that manager to try to acquire the resource or to explain to you why the resource is not available. Like you might have requested a new computer and the manager might have to go and find out, and she might come back and say, you know, we don't have the budget this year for the computer. We'll try to see if we can add a program to your computer or, you know, whatever. But the manager is the one who is supposed to pick up that information from the appraisal and take the necessary action.
Right.
So it might be training you need, and the manager is supposed to, you know, put forward the application for training. And depending on the response that she gets, whether from the training department or whatever, she's supposed to come back to you and indicate to you what's going to happen with these developmental activities.
Okay, miss. Got it.
Somebody else had a hand up, but it has disappeared. Somebody else was asking something.
Yes, miss. Wanted to know.
Who is this? Who is this?
Reeves, Shauna.
Shauna, okay.
Yes. As it relates to the best practice and the process, from the employee feedback survey, is it mandated that the staff be made aware of the findings? Is it encouraged?
It is encouraged that there should be a meeting, a staff meeting held. And
not just only management, sorry.
No, management is the first level that should be told about the findings. And then a meeting should be held where employees are told about the findings and what are the plans to correct any gaps that were validated.
All right, I'm employed in the government service. Where I am now, I've never seen one executed. The closest thing I've ever seen is an HR audit that is done by OSC. When that is done, the report is sent in, but it's only discussed at the senior management level.
If it's an audit, yes. If it's an audit, then that's different. Okay, that's going to be different. If an HR audit is done, the results of that audit are not going to cascade down to all employees. That's an audit is going to be handled at the senior level.
Even if the inputs of all levels are cross-section.
Yes. Yes, an audit, you see, an audit is a whole different process. The employee satisfaction survey is not a full audit, but if a full HR audit is done, that information is going to be handled at the highest level. Yes, because there's other implications for it, and a lot of the questions that you may be asked as part of the audit is only one area of that HR audit. An HR audit, because I do HR audits sometimes, and HR audits are very they're very intricate, okay, because it looks at a lot of things, not just the feedback that they would be getting from the employees. But it might look at, for instance, staffing practices. It's going to look at use of resources, budget management. You know, it's going to look at the succession plan. It might even look at disaster management, a lot of those things. An HR audit is a very comprehensive organizational procedure. But the employee satisfaction surveys we always recommend that those be discussed. But I don't know that government does employee satisfaction surveys. I don't know. Private sector does. You see, you have to remember, you know, the government has its own set of rules and regulations, right? Its own set of guidelines. As I said, you are managed by the staff orders, while the private sector is managed by the labor laws.
The reason why I pulled on that, because that would be the only mechanism that I've seen them employer that would actually bring some amount of feedback. And I'm thinking, if it is, how do you know that the issues or concerns raised or that came to light in the survey would have been addressed, if not through another posted?
Yeah, but you know, the employee, as I said, won't know what those gaps are, because it's a high level audit. An HR audit is a very high level audit, similar to when you see Mrs. Monroe Ellis go to do her audit. Now, when she goes out to do her overall audit of the organization under the law, because it goes to Parliament, the public has to be made aware. But if you notice, it's not all of the areas of the audit that are also made aware in the public domain, you know, even though all of it is discussed in Parliament. But not all of it that actually reaches. We hear the very negative parts of it. We hardly ever hear the positive parts of those audits. The negative parts we hear most times if there's fraud and whatever else.
Misuse of funds and so on.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. And I've combined 4 and 5 here. So you notice I have the numbers on the top here, 4 and 5. So I've combined performance assessment and performance review. Okay, so when we look at performance assessment, we have to decide now what is going to happen with the results of the evaluation. How are we going to use them? And also, are we going to have a self-assessment included in the process? Now, somebody just spoke about self-assessment as part of their experience. Many of the systems I'm seeing here locally have not made provisions for the use of a self-assessment. The self-assessment is a very, very important tool, because you'll come to learn that it prevents a lot of things from taking place. It prevents a lot of things from happening in the organization when we have a self-assessment. It encourages communication with the supervisor. It allows an employee to take accountability for his or her performance, because what happens when we do the self-assessments is that you're asked to rate yourself against the tasks that, you know, that you were given, against the goals and objectives that you were given, and against your job description. And it allows for a proper discussion between the employee and the supervisor during the performance appraisal. And we find that employees become less defensive when a self-appraisal is in place, okay? But it allows for proper assessment as well, because yes, the supervisor can forget that you did something very well, and the supervisor is going to sometimes disagree with your self-assessment. And when we get to that portion, you will see why, you know, a self-assessment cannot be the only tool as well that is used to rate somebody's performance. But in designing the system, we have to decide whether, as part of the performance assessment, whether a self-assessment will be one of the criteria required by the system, okay? And then we have the appraisal meeting, okay? And we'll have to decide how appraisals are going to be done, what guidelines you want to put in place so that we ensure that the process is an objective one. In other words, we don't want any abuse to take place by supervisors or managers there. And we won't want a situation where the employee is not allowed to be a part of the process in terms of the communication. So we have to decide whether the review is going to be properly put together, and therefore we write guidelines for the system to allow that to take place. Very, very important, you know, because employees become very apprehensive at the time of appraisal. So it's very, very important that we put in some recommended steps as part of the system in terms of how appraisals should be carried out. And we need to put in these guidelines because a lot of managers are very uncomfortable in giving feedback. They would rather it just be a checklist and then they bring it to you until you sign off on it. Because they're uncomfortable giving face-to-face information, especially if some of the information that they have to give you about your performance is less than good, you know, is negative. And especially if your rating is turning out to be low, you know, they're uncomfortable with it. So we have to ensure that we put in recommended steps and we look at how the appraisals are going to be done. Are they going to be done twice for the year? Are they going to be done with more frequency based on the type of organization? Many companies here in Jamaica are only doing an appraisal once a year, and then they wonder why they fail. Because it's at the end of the year that they're finding out that an employee was not productive or a goal was not achieved. 40% of the project was achieved, but 100% of the money was spent, etc. There was no warning sign because the appraisals are only done at the end of the year. So we do recommend that there should be at least be a mid-year appraisal to allow for any correctability, and then an annual. There were 2 hands raised. Where are they?
Miss, I'm still here.
Rashina and Mitchell.
Yes, yes.
Miss, the question that Rashina here, the question that I want to ask, how important is it as employee for us to properly or to grade ourselves in-depthly during the self-assessment part? Because sometimes, especially if you're working and there's no drive or motivation or you lack that engagement, you just go to work every day, go through the motion, and you say, well, for the development part, or to answer the question, if you have met any target or whatever it is, and you probably put any then because you just lack that interest. But can it do more harm than good to us if we really don't grade ourselves properly?
Of course.
Okay.
If you are not producing, if you are so demotivated that you don't feel like producing, then you better be prepared for the repercussions. Because what will happen is that you end up with an unsatisfactory performance score. Now, if you continue to end up with an unsatisfactory performance score, and especially if it is in a critical part of your job, then you have set up yourself to exit that organization. Because no company is going to keep you. Government has been very lenient with poor performers, but in private sector, no organization is going to keep you if you keep turning up with an unsatisfactory score. So if you can't explain your performance yourself, and then when you go to sit in front of your manager for your appraisal and she gives you a 0 in that area, and you start to argue with her and then say, well, I was too demotivated to do this and that is not a valid explanation of your performance. And then you get into a hassle with her. So it's very important for you to take responsibility for your performance. Very, very important. The organization is never going to provide you with everything that you need to be motivated. And this is why we say that, you know, when we're hiring people, we ask a lot of questions about somebody's self-motivation and what motivates you. It cannot be just the money, okay? Whether you're intrinsically motivated, which means that you are able to motivate yourself regardless of the environment that you find yourself in, you are able to dig yourself out. So it's very important that you be honest on your self-appraisal and honest to yourself, but you need to watch it, because you can't put on your self-appraisal what doesn't exist either. In terms of, yes, I performed this, and yet when they ask for the results are not there. As a matter of fact, government uses as part of the goal setting period something called a work plan. And I see creeping into the private sector as well. And one of the columns in that work plan is asking for what is the proof that somebody carried out this work? In other words, how was this work done? Okay, so, you know, a lot of things are going to change again in the private sector too. And in the public sector, it is changing. So self-assessments are very, very important. You can't fudge those. And if you decide, well, I just didn't do it because I didn't feel like doing it, then you have set yourself up for failure in terms of what your performance score is going to look like. Who's the other person asking?
That's me, Miss. I wasn't asking. I was saying something similar to what you were just saying now, that the self-assessment is very, very important. At my organization at Digicel, it's mandatory that all employees complete a self-assessment before their manager completes it on their behalf. And it allows for transparency, and it allows for myself as an employee to see, or for you to see how well I believe I performed,
yes,
versus how my manager thinks or believes or observed that I performed over that period. Additionally, it helps you as the employee if at the final stage or on any point of the assessment process, you disagree with what your manager, the rating your manager gave you. The self-assessment allows for you to make comments on each goals even after you score yourself. So say, for example, a goal is that at the end of October, I must achieve or obtain 80% of sales. When I do, say, for example, I meet expectation or I exceed expectation, I'm able to comment to say, during this point in time or this duration or time period, I was able to meet my sales target by 80%, which is exceeding the expectation. So you're able to make comments so that even if your manager does not remember that you really did that, you're basically showing your manager and highlighting important details that they may forget. Or even if you disagree with the score and you must go to HR, you did your own appraisal, you input your own details, and you have proof. We are even able to upload documents within our own self-rating. So say, for example, we got this sale, we got this email, we got this, whatever it is, we are able to upload that information during the self-rating. So as an employee, it helps you.
Offer the proof. Yeah.
Yes, it is a form of proof. So it helps you as the employee. Also, the appraisal meetings, they're very important because that is how, as an employee, I will know what I need to work on. As you mentioned, a lot of managers are afraid to have that difficult conversation. I've had instances where employees come to me as HR to say, I don't believe I performed well, or I believe I need coaching, or I need training in this area, when they had a discussion with their manager, but their manager didn't bring that up and they were afraid to have that conversation, or the meeting itself was just a checkbox.
Yes.
So it's very important for you to have the appraisal meeting.
And we will be talking more about the actual guidelines for the appraisal meeting, what should take place, because we have to be careful and ensure that it is not an abusive activity as well, and that it is factual and objective. So all of these things are going to come up again lower down in more detail as we move towards like finalizing what the system is. And you will see what a self-appraisal should contain and what it looks like, etc. Okay, next. Thanks for those comments, both of you. Next. Okay, so we get to the final stage. And this is a stage that a lot of persons don't think about, and that is, why do we have to recontract an employee? Now, somebody spoke about, you know, the fact that you might be demotivated, etc. But we are suggesting that after the appraisal meeting, it's very, very important that the manager, supervisor, whoever the appraisee was, uses this information to re-energize the employee, okay? It is almost the same stage as the stage that we refer to as performance planning. It's like you're going back to the beginning, but each time you have come to the end of an appraisal, especially the annual appraisal, it's important for you, the manager, the supervisor, to re-motivate the employee, to use the information that you gathered during the appraisal process to make adjustments to whether the goals and objectives or adjustments to the standards or adjustments to how you want to manage that employee. But it's very, very important that you let that person, no matter how poor the performance is, allow that person to leave that appraisal meeting re-energized and re-motivated. So as a manager, your communication skills are very, very important. Poor communication skills and performance management does not go together well. So we have to always ensure that we do things to force managers to communicate properly, because you're going to have a balance where some do it well and some do not do it well. But one of the things to notice here is that it's like a revolving door. Performance management, the process is like a revolving door. It starts all over again. So each year, as the company sets its goals and objectives or revises the goals and objectives, the process, all of this has to go around again. And this is why managers, yes, will tell you that it's a lot of work, because it's a cycle. It's a cycle that starts with the prerequisites and it ends with the renewal and recontracting. And you have to set the goals for the next period and get the commitment from the employee to improve whatever the performance was if there's a deficiency, and you start all over again. Yes, Shauna? Not Shauna, Michelle. Michelle, you have your hand up.
I need to take my hand down.
Pardon me?
Sorry, I need to take my hand down.
Okay, okay. Any questions? Because we're going to move now into another area. Any questions? Where's the rest of the class? Where are all of you? Gone to sleep? Okay, Stacy, and you have your hand raised.
Yes, Miss. It's just a reflection based on what you have just discussed with us. I have been working in the public sector, and all of these things that we have just discussed, I didn't see any of these taking place. Whenever time for us to do our PMAS, we would just complete it and say, because it is a requirement for us to complete it, we just complete it and we get a passing grade, and we say, okay, we'll pass and that's it. For the section that asks for training and development, we would normally write something for ourselves there just to complete the form. And when the form is taken by our supervisor, that's it. We don't hear anything else about it. And we sometimes ask questions and our own manager and supervisor can't even answer the question to say. We normally ask, where are these going? Sometimes we hear that we're going to get some incentive. When we check the pay at the end of the financial year, no increase. And so there's no real accountability in the public sector as it relates to PMAS. I don't know if anybody else can relate to it, but chapter 2 and chapter 3 is really an eye-opener for me. I think I'm going to go back and ask a lot of questions the next time it comes around.
There are problems in the public sector, and this is why the transformation is taking place. There are problems. When PMAS was started at first, it never worked. They paid a lot of money and it was done by some, I think, overseas consultants. And for years, they couldn't get it implemented. And then they started again and it wasn't implemented, and they have started again. And what I see happening is that some of the agencies, like I work as a consultant, and I've had opportunities to go into a couple of the agencies where they've asked me to come in and to explain the system, because what is happening is that some of the users don't understand the system. So a lot of times I have been able to go in and do a consultation, to hold sessions to teach employees how to use the system, managers and supervisors how to use the system, and how to make it work and how to make it objective as well. So I don't know what will happen, you know, going forward, but I've done at least 5 agencies I have been into to do PMAS training. Now I understand that the government again is in the process of changing the system. I understand that PMAS is going to change. That they are looking at changes to it. I don't know if it is still going to be called PMAS or whatever. The other thing to keep in mind is that the agencies that are executive agencies, they have the ability to develop their own system. They're not on PMAS. So you have people that would be like mortgage bank, and somebody has something going on that is very disruptive, please. Something going on, you're pulling something around that's causing a lot of noise. The executive agencies have been able to design their own systems. So they're not using PMAS. All those people that are statutory bodies or have been deemed to be executive agencies are not using PMAS. Most of them have gone ahead and had systems designed for them.
Miss, I'm wondering if it is based on the size of the organization, why it is not monitored properly. Because
no, I think it had to do with implementation. I think in most cases, it has had to do with implementation. And I find that a lot of the persons just didn't understand how to use it. And for that reason, it is just kind of sitting there. They just kind of fill out something, and you know, and it is coming from the top down, because if the head does not buy into the system, no matter what kind of organization you are, it cannot work. So within a particular agency or ministry, if there's not mandatory, if they don't make it mandatory that the system be used and be used properly, it's not going to happen throughout the organization. So it has to start from the top. So most of them that I've gone into, HR has been able to convince the head of the organization that they need to do some specific training and they need to take some steps to try and implement the system properly.
Good evening. Good evening, Miss.
Yeah, just
sorry.
Just one more point I have.
I have 2 persons speaking at the same time. Yeah.
Stacey, let me just finish the point.
Who is speaking now? Who is speaking now?
I wanted to finish a point with you, Miss.
Who is this? Rashida? Who is speaking?
This is Stacey.
Stacey, okay.
Right. I am saying in the public sector also, for some ministry, I think HR does not exist. I think they are more of administrative body than anything else. So maybe all of this need to be addressed first before we can actually start.
Remember, starting this week, you didn't see the announcement. You didn't see the announcement that government is now going to centralize all of the HR functions. You didn't see that?
That's going to be a disaster waiting to happen.
I know it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be
in black and white.
It's going to be very difficult, but it's as part of the transformation process. I've known about it for at least 2 years. And I participated in a strategic planning exercise. I was a facilitator, and I know that it was coming because the whole transformation project, it's one of the priority areas of the transformation project. So they are now ready to implement it. So I think you're going to see a lot of changes happening. A lot of the HR managers have become a little nervous because whenever there's centralization, sometimes there's a loss of jobs, etc., etc. So I imagine in the next couple of weeks, you'll hear more about it. I actually didn't even read the news release in detail because I was a little busy over the last 2 days. But there's a news release about it.
This is Anne.
Who else is asking?
This is Anne. I'm actually driving. Sorry, I've just left the office and I'm not seeing a reason on my phone. So my apologies. I just wanted to
who is talking? Who is talking?
So this is Anne Emil. I'm actually driving.
Okay.
Don't have a reason. Just left the office. My apologies. I just wanted to dictate to what my colleague says. I too am work with the government, and everything she says is true. I'm not sure they know how to use a PMA system. Just today I was told I was supposed to be at my top of my scale. I should have got some incremental increase based on my performance, and none of that is done. And every minute they're training and doing some training with the PMA system. So I really hope this new system and the whole centralization will improve how they conduct appraisals for the civilians, because we're in trouble as it is now with most of the HR managers, as she said, is more administrative.
So who does the training? HR is doing the training?
Well, HR, sometimes they outsource it. Sometimes they invite persons to come in.
Yeah, as I said, I've been into about 5 agencies so far, you know, to do PMAS training. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before we move? Okay.
Just to share.
Sorry,
just to share, Miss.
Sorry, Camille. I was asking where I could find the news release for that, because I'm online.
I don't know. I just saw it. I just happened to have seen it on it might have been Google or something, because I have stopped taking the daily papers because I'm trying to limit my contact with persons as a result of COVID. So I'm not sure which of the news feeds it's on, but I saw it. I thought I saw it and I think it might have been Google's, either Twitter or Google I saw it on, but I just was too busy to stop to read it in full.
Okay.
But it should be in the Glean now. If you have access to Glean online, it should be in there.
Okay, I'll check that.
Because it's a public service announcement. Camille, you were asking a question?
Yes, I was just sharing that another important step in the performance appraisal system and the overall performance management system is the goal setting process, the objective setting, and doing that with the employee, having that sit down with them, and you both as supervisor and employee decide on what the objectives will be for the new year and the weightings attached to each. And then when the assessment comes along, then you would have already agreed to these objectives. You would have known clearly what is expected of you, and you would be in a better position to rate yourself. I can concur with Michelle. That's the system. That's exactly the same system that the company that I'm aligned with uses. And they also rate you on competencies. And the competencies are aligned with the goals and objectives and values of the company. So there is communication, flexibility, and the passion assesses how well you model the vision and the values of the company. So the kind of activities that you engage in, company related, that is also assessed. You assess yourself and the supervisor assesses you. And every single skill, every duty, every objective, and every competence has a section where you insert your comments. So if there's a reason why you didn't achieve an exceptional level or a good report or a good outcome, you can state why, and clearly outline why. And towards the end, you can give an overall review on your own performance, and the supervisor is also required to do that. And it does say that the signature does not indicate that you agree, but just that there was a sit down with you and your supervisor, and the discussion was had and the appraisal was done. So yeah, it's quite comprehensive. But just to say that the objective setting is so important to start with.
Well, that's exactly where we're moving into now, into the next module about strategic planning. As we go along, you're going to see how you actually arrive at competencies and behaviors, because behaviors are competencies. And you're going to see that in doing a system, you need a balance. You're going to have to deal with competencies and results, but I don't want to preempt that part of it because I don't want you to get confused, but we're going to have a detailed discussion about measuring and managing and the types of approaches to measuring and managing performance and how we measure the whole performance, okay, which means behaviors and results, okay? So next, please, Miss Olivine.
Anna Kay and Tamika made their remarks.
I don't see them. Are they there?
I have raised hands.
Sorry, miss. I had my hands. This is Tamika. I had my hands raised earlier just to give an input. But some of what I would have shared was said already by one of my colleagues. Read the experience of the performance management system in the private sector. And I was just sharing that, likewise, that's what I was familiar with, having do the assessment yourself. I think then what I recall was this, as an assessment, a self-assessment was required quarterly. And then it was just one that was done at the end of the year that would collate all that the employee would have done on their own. It's one that would have been done with the supervisor. And all the checkpoints, remember someone mentioned earlier that, you know, just in case somebody would have forgotten, I was saying the one that I am familiar with had no allowance for that because everything would have to be indicated. So for example, if it is that you were appraised on referrals, there would have been a system for inputting referrals, and that report would have been referred to at the end. If you were supposed to have a tally based on sales, though, you would have to pull the report for that. So everything would pretty much be recorded. I can't recall, based on what you said, I'm thinking the signing part. I do recall persons not signing if they were in disagreement.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I do recall. And then it would be a matter of
what happens in that case? If they do not sign, what takes place?
So when the employee and the supervisor disagrees and it is not signed, I know that they normally have a conversation then with HR, and the part that they normally perhaps don't agree to, it is the supervisor's final comment or overall comment, but that is what I do recall. When it is not signed, so the employee has a section where they do their thing, give their information, the supervisor likewise. But I have seen cases where it's not signed, and I know then HR steps in, a conversation is had, but at the end of the day, it is submitted. I've seen it being submitted to HR without the signature of the employee, and what happens is that the supervisor normally makes an indication. So they'll say the conversation was had, the discussion took place, employee A is not in agreement, and hence their has not signed.
Right, but this is why it is so important for an appeals process to be put in, because if an employee refuses to sign it because there's a disagreement, it should go to a committee for a final disposition to be made. Okay, it is not to be just left hanging like that because it has implications. Because for instance, if this is tied to a performance incentive and the employee did not sign off on the form, the incentive cannot be paid. So we will talk about, how to handle the performance review meeting itself. That is going to fall into that category. And you can remind me again when you get to that stage, because that is a very, very important matter. And we also will discuss, when we talk about the performance appraisal meeting, we'll talk about handling conflict, because conflict does occur. sometimes during the appraisal review. Okay, thanks for that. Anna Kay, you have your hand up, right?
Yes, miss. All right, miss, it was up for a little while, so I was gonna speak along the lines of, I just wanted to make the comment to say that I know that I am a little bit quiet, but I'm really quiet because I am really listening attentive, because there's so much that's being said now that I actually cannot relate to at all. Before we started the first lecture, as I had said, I watched the video on HRD TV, and the one line you said that stood out to me was that performance management is not performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is a part of, a component of performance management. The more I listen, the more questions I have to ask. So many questions. I'm filled with questions right now, especially for my organization, because when I entered teaching, the one line that they kept on saying is that the teacher is the hardest person to fire. It's really hard to get rid of a teacher. So much so that some persons have now worn it as a badge of honor to say, you know, if I do something, I do see memos being sent around, persons are written up for lateness, persons are written up for incomplete lesson plans, that sort of a thing, all kinds of breaches. But at the end of the day, there's only one appraisal sheet that we get at the end of the year. And like Stacey-Ann, after you complete it, and I concur also with what Michelle was saying about your self-appraisal being so important. You do all of that, it just goes up in flames. There's nothing that is done about it. I even want to ask you, in a performance management system, what is the proposed number of times that somebody should be appraised throughout the year? Because honestly, one time, and it really has nothing to do with the other breaches that you would have made throughout the year. So I'm really listening because it's very interesting to me. I'm learning a lot. And so I can hardly really give a comment to really enrich what you're saying in terms of relating to the experiences. But I really do have questions, and I'm really listening. So many questions, to be honest.
The teachers have a problem. Teachers have a problem, and it has existed for a long time. The Ministry of Education has wrestled with the whole matter of performance appraisal. It has come a long way in terms of, you know, something exists. It is still not perfect. I've seen some of the forms, because we have had a couple of teachers in the program too. And I sat on a school board for a long time. Okay, I sat on the school board of the school where I went to school up until about 2 years ago. And it is a problem. It is a unique problem, similar to the public sector problem. I don't know why they can't rectify it. I don't know if it is that they have difficulty trying to figure out what it is they need to appraise, you know, for the teachers. You know, I see different schools with different forms, and I understand that maybe there's a basic form, but the school is allowed to also add stuff to it. So whether they're appraising you based on your lesson plans and the quality of your lesson plans or whatever, there are problems. I know that the Ministry of Education has problems with the performance appraisal process. Now, I can't make you feel better, because I know that there is problems with it, and it depends on the schools. I don't know if it has to do with the regional officers not monitoring the schools, or what. Some schools are doing the appraisal, some are not doing the appraisal, and what they're using it for in terms of the results of the appraisal is another matter. So there are problems. There are problems with that system. Sorry, I can't make you feel any better. Okay, I see 3 other persons asking. I know we need to move on, but let me see if I can take these very quickly, because I do need to cover something else before you leave. Who's asking? I see 3 participants raised hands, but I can't tell you. My screen is not showing me the entire class because I have the major slide up. Okay?
Sorry,
Who's
Miss.
asking? Who's asking?
Miss, this is Tamika. I just wanted to add, I'm not sure if it comes under the same performance management based on when Annika said for the teachers, like one appraisal for the year, it really isn't enough. As I mentioned before, what I know is that we usually do quarterly by yourself, one with supervisor or management. But I do recall that persons who had failed performance appraisal in the past, they were subject to to monthly, I think monthly appraisals thereafter. I don't know if it would be categorized as that, but I know that they did call it a PIP at the time, which was performance improvement plan.
Right. You're a teacher too?
No, that was in the financial sector.
Okay. Yeah, you see, this is what I'm saying to you. When the systems are being designed, and remember the prerequisites, it's important for you to look at what is the system to be used for, which is what I said, and therefore you design the system to meet the organization's needs. So like what you spoke about with the PIP, that would have been like a requirement coming out of the developmental part of the performance appraisal, where if somebody's score falls below a certain amount, then yes, they should be put on a performance improvement plan. That's the remedial aspect of the appraisal process. So companies decide whether they're going to have a developmental and remedial, or they're going to use the developmental portion to do remedial work as well. And that is where the PIP comes in. The company will also decide how many times for the year they want the appraisals to be done. That's why all that information that you gather at the beginning is so important, so that you design a system that's going to be of benefit to the organization and to the employees as well. So you're going to find that some persons, as I said, may have a 3-month appraisal, others twice for the year. The all-time appraisal is the once for the year. And that is the one that is disastrous, because it's not allowing for any corrections to be made throughout the year. Because all of a sudden, employees here at the end of the year that they didn't do well. And that was it. They were not given any opportunity throughout the year to improve, no feedback. There was no mid-year appraisal so that, you know, they could pull up if they were falling behind on something. They've gotten a warning to pull up and that sort of stuff. So the annual appraisal really does not serve the purpose of performance management. And this is why I always question, what does the organization intend to use the results of the appraisal to do? What is the purpose of it? Okay, some other hands raised. Let me get through this quickly, guys. I need to go back into your slides.
Miss, for my organization, well, for my employer, what we do once yearly annual performance plan, the same thing that you call appraisal, annual performance plan, that's once a year. But we do a monthly coaching. And what the monthly coaching does is to highlight your achievements, highlight any weakness, highlight any area that you need to develop on. It also make mention of something that another area that you want to learn. So every month, and the supervisor gives feedback of what you can do, what you should not do, or make advice and suggestions. So that is done monthly. So by the time the end of the year now, in November, December, when we should do the annual performance plan, we should be at a better position than not knowing how you're performing for the entire year, and then bam, this is come, and then you hear, oh, you're incompetent, you're this, you're that, and it was like, then how come you didn't tell me all of this throughout the year that I could improve on it? So this is how the coaching and feedback is monthly.
Yeah, so, you know, some organizations are able to do that. Not every organization is able to have a monthly meeting, but there are supposed to be provisions for coaching and feedback throughout the year. And not every organization has the wherewithal to do a monthly appraisal either.
A monthly meeting, it's basically, let's say that you're supervising maybe 5 person. So it is mandatory for the supervisor to take some time, maybe 15 minutes.
If you have been structured into small groups, yes, it's possible, you know, to do it like that.
Right.
And the larger organizations that have the resources will have a lot of those systems in place. So this is why it is very important to also design a system that the organization can manage. So this is why we have to look at the resources of the organization, you know, the budget of the organization, all that sort of stuff. Okay, all right, some very, very good feedback. I mightn't have covered everybody, but you know, let's move on, and then, you know, in the next class or stuff, maybe some of that can come back again. But I want to at least start into the strategic planning module. Okay. And by the way, somebody posted where you can go and find the news feed based on what is going to happen in the sector. Okay, so you can look in the chat and you'll see it. Okay, next please. Okay, this is a very important module. I've been talking a lot with you about strategic planning. And I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to be part of a strategic planning process. But it's very, very important because this is where the tone of what the organization will embark upon is set. And unfortunately, because we're online now, normally I would go to the board and draw a diagram for you so that those of you that have never been exposed to it can understand what takes place. But unfortunately, you know, I don't think I can do that now, even though my computer has a pen, but it doesn't allow me in the PowerPoints like this on Zoom to write on it. But basically, it's the process, as it says here, that sets the organization's destination. It's also the process that looks at what are the gaps or barriers that could prevent the organization from moving forward. And it's also the process by which they select the approaches that they're going to use. So we think of the strategic plan as a blueprint. You know, when you're building a house, you have to get a set of plans, and it details out for you what is to be in every room and the thickness of the walls and whatever. The company's strategic plan is similar to that. It's a blueprint. And it also defines how the organization and where the organization will put its resources in order to achieve its goals. It's a very important process. Now, one of the things to understand about the strategic plan is that not every employee participates in strategic planning. Strategic planning is a high-level activity, but the results of the strategic planning are cascaded down throughout the organization. So how it usually works is that the board of directors will participate in a strategic plan. So if you want to draw a triangle, if you follow me and draw a triangle on your paper, okay? So the first level is the board of directors at the tip of the triangle. And the next level, if you draw a line across the triangle, you know, like you're making a box, the next level becomes the senior management. The next level below that, if you draw a box again, becomes the middle management. And then the space that is left below that, you put all others, meaning all other employees. Now, what this is to say is
Wait,
that—
sorry, miss. You said board of directors.
Board of directors, senior management, middle management, and then all others.
Thanks, miss.
So that's the hierarchy of how the planning is done and how the information gets down to the rest of the staff. So the board of directors will have a retreat, okay? They'll have a retreat, and the retreat might be for 2 days or 3 days. Some of them might start on a Thursday and go all the way through Sunday, okay, depending on the size of the organization, etc. And the retreat is aimed at discussing whether it be for 5 years or 10 years, or some of them, depending on the size of the company, might start at 3 years. But exactly what the company is going to embark on based on its mission and its vision over that period of time. So the senior management participates in the retreat. Middle management, sometimes, depending on how the organization's culture is, might invite the middle management to come to the retreat for a day. But overall, the senior management which is the top leadership of the organization, and the board of directors sit down to chart the way for the company going forward. And this is how your goals and objectives occur, because when the retreat is done, the senior management has to come back and take the strategies that they've been given and the major goals that they've been given and break them down for the senior, for themselves and for the middle management. And then the middle management has to break that down so that the supervisors and all others get their goals and objectives. So in a nutshell, it's a cascading effect, and that is how you get your goals, objectives, and tasks. Now, each year, they will revisit the plan and subtract what has been accomplished and bring forward. So each year, out of that plan, they develop what is called an operational plan. So those of you in the public sector, you know that you have an operational plan. You're not really seeing the big plan, but you will see the operational plan. The structures might differ depending on the type of organization you are and the size of organization. But what I've given you is the basic structure in terms of how goals and objectives are set and how they're cascaded down. And we go back again to the purpose when we speak about the company having a strategic purpose. The performance management system is the only system still, even though it might be called a balanced scorecard or something else, it's the only system that can tell the organization and go back to the board of directors and tell the organization that, yes, we are achieving these goals and objectives. We had a goal of making $100 million in sales in year one. And the plan is usually set out by year, okay? So by year 5, we wanted to make $100 million. So that means that we need to make $20 million per year, right? $200 million per year. So in year 1, goals and objectives would have been set to achieve making that revenue of 200 million. But when the plan is done, the plan has a strategy, okay? It has goals, objectives, strategy, etc. Okay, and some of you may have seen it. I don't know if for next week, if I can remember, maybe I can, well, I can't draw a slide on here. But basically, it's a document, and it's a very important document. So when you get the goals and objectives, they're not just being set to you by somebody's head, okay? It's a part of a plan, a part of a plan. Now, strategic planning has its roots in a military operation. It's military, okay? So that, for instance, when the US had the big war in Afghanistan, okay? A lot of people questioned what this war was all about. So the first thing the government did was they had a goal. And most persons question what the goal was, but it came out to say that the goal was to get oil. So how were they going to get this oil? That was the strategy. So what was the strategy? The strategy was to go to war. Somebody needs a little control there. So they went to war, that was the strategy. Then when the war happened, they had goals and objectives that were to be achieved in the war, whether they were going to capture a city or whether they were going to capture oil well or whatever. So that is how, when we speak about strategy and planning and stuff, it all starts usually with a plan, okay? And the same thing happens in the organization. Any organization that doesn't have a plan doesn't know where it is heading. Now in government, the Vision 2030, became the base document for setting the government's strategic plan. That was like their base strategic plan, the corporate plan. And then from that, all the ministries were given operational plans. And every so many months, they have to report on where they have reached with these operational plans. Okay? So the Vision 2030 is actually a booklet. I actually have one of it because, again, among the things that I do strategic planning. So this is why I can relate to you exactly what happens from public and from private. Okay? So basically, the goals and objectives that are set in the organization, and we'll talk a little bit lower down about the goal setting process. But it's important to understand what is a strategic plan. And if you were to put it in a nutshell, you would say that firstly, it allows the organization to define their identity. Who are we? Or mission, vision, because they usually look at the mission and vision. Can you go back to the first slide, please? Can you go back, Ms. Thomas? Can you go back to the first slide? Slide 20, yeah. Most strategic planning processes for the major plan, okay, and setting the plan for the first time, must revisit the mission and vision of the organization because that sets the tone for where they're heading. So they look at mission and vision and mission as part of the planning process. If your plan has been set for 3 years or 5 years, at the end of the 5 years, they start the process totally over again. You find that large companies will do a longer planning process. If you're a multinational, you might have a 10-year or a 15-year plan because naturally, you don't want to go into a country for a short period of time. So you have a larger plan because you're planning on entering maybe 10 countries within that period of time. But every year you have to do an operational plan that is taking out of the big plan, which we refer to as the corporate plan, whatever is to be done for that year, and making sure that we do what is called operationalize it, that these things are being carried out by the employees, okay? And some things will carry over into more than 1 year. Some things that are to happen in year 3, the planning for it might have to start in year 1. So you might see some of the goals that are to occur in the 3rd year, bits and pieces of it in the 1st year and the 2nd year, etc. So it's a whole process and people have to be trained to do it. One of the big failings is that a lot of managers are not trained to write proper goals and objectives. Okay, we'll talk a little more about that later on. But you cannot write something that you cannot measure. And any company that does not have proper goal set cannot measure performance, cannot measure productivity, and you cannot manage anything that you cannot measure. So this is why we have so many failures sometimes, okay? So as I said, the first and foremost benefit is that it allows the organization to define their identity, and it helps to provide them with a sense of who they are and what is their purpose. Secondly, it helps them to prepare for the future. Third, it will allow them to analyze their environment and anticipate the future changes. Now, COVID is a thank you, Miss Thomas. COVID is one of those situations where if they can't adapt to what is going on here now, they're in trouble. Most companies have had to go back and look at their strategic plan because whatever they forecasted in many cases is not happening. There's only a few industries that have been able to jump ahead and make use of what has happened with COVID that can say they're making a profit. Everybody is laying off people. They're telling you they're making no profits because all the things that they had in the strategic plan, especially the revenue generation, is not happening. I don't know if you saw over the last day, the people in the entertainment industry screaming, because as you can imagine, if I was somebody who had an entertainment company, my strategic plan has gone completely. I have no money coming in, I can't hold a party. And that is why the entertainment sector is balling, because many of those companies will not survive. So a strategic plan allows you to be able to put other contingencies in place. I mean, you should have been thinking, okay, if something should happen and I couldn't host my big dream parties for the year, what else could my company do? And in the absence of a plan, those persons are kind of left out in the cold. So it provides a focus and allows you to better allocate the resources that you have as well. So as you look at how you're going to use your capital, your money, have a strategic plan, it allows you to do that. It also allows you to encourage cooperation across the organization. And by doing that as well, it helps the company to build its competitiveness. Any company that cannot be competitive cannot survive. It also helps you to look at new options and opportunities. So this is what is happening. Many of the companies did not have a plan. So right now, they can't even look at, okay, as Jamaicans would say, let me turn my hand and make fashion. Okay, what can I do with some of what I have? What else can I now manufacture quickly? Can I retool my manufacturing area to make use of this COVID opportunity in some way? Because COVID, even though it's a disaster, it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for a lot of things. Look at the people who are now selling online systems. Look at what has happened with online sales. Everybody is selling something online, from food to clothes to everything, okay? People are offering to tutor online, lots of things, okay? And also it allows for employees to get a lot of information so that they understand again what are the behaviors that are needed and what results really matter, what really matters. So basically, overall, you wondered why I'm telling you about strategic planning, but the information in this forms the basis for the performance appraisal. It forms the basis for the goal setting in the performance management system. It is the basis for the system. It is the information that allows the performance management system to exist. So with that, I'm going to close for the night, but I want to ask you to read that chapter. It's one of your more difficult chapters, and you will have a better understanding again if you can identify with what I'm saying. So before we go, there's one little announcement that we're going to make, in that you're wondering what is happening to the coursework. I still have not sent you the coursework because I'm still having to try to organize the groups and organize the instructions. And in doing so, we also realize that we have a little blip in the calendar. Ms. Thomas is with us. Ms. Thomas, you still here?
Yes.
So we are going to be adding back another class. We will have to tell you the date. Ms. Thomas and myself, you know, are discussing it, and we'll have to tell you where that date falls. Because in order to carry out all the coursework, etc., we realized that we had a little gap in the calendar.
You lost a day because of Ash Wednesday.
Miss, you remember you told us February 18th, or this is a different?
Yes, there's still going to be another day.
Oh.
There's going to be one more day. The one that February 18 made up for Ash Wednesday, but we realized that we're still short of a class. So we'll come back and tell you where that class is going to be. We're looking at the calendar to see where we can possibly fit in that class. Okay. So over the next couple of days, Ms. Thomas and myself will discuss it. And once I have that now, I'll be able to finish working on the group allocations, because that's what I'm looking at, which group presents when, and the dates. The dates are important. Okay. Any
And
questions?
one last thing about the practicum showcase on Friday.
Oh yes, Miss Thomas. Please tell them about that.
No, guys, the last course that you do for this program is the HRD practicum. That comes around once a year, obviously, because it is the last course that any cohort does. But
and it's 6 credits.
Yes, and you don't leave if you don't leave here with a degree if you don't do it and pass it. But we're going to have the practicum showcase where some of the students who are our award winners will be coming to describe their practica and to answer questions for you that you may have about the practicum, because you will be doing it in a year's time. So we want you to come. We're inviting you. It is an online thing. We start at 6 o'clock on Friday. It won't be a long thing. It's 3 presenters. So they'll present their work and field any questions that you and obviously the cohort before you have. This is supposed to help you to reduce any anxieties that you might have, because it's funny, students are more anxious about the practicum than they are about statistics or any of those other courses.
Yes.
But it is nothing to be afraid of. And so we're inviting you to come and hear persons who aced the course. These are our prize winners, people who did so well. It's a consultancy and they did so well that we gave them prizes for it. So please join us. As I said, it's online. I sent out the link. So please take advantage of that opportunity. You will have at most only one other opportunity if you miss Friday to see a practicum showcase. So I think don't squander the opportunity, please.
Yeah, I want to stress to you that it's very, very important that you begin from now to think about practicum. Performance management is one of the practicums as well. But it's very, very important because it's, as Ms. Thomas says, it's your last course. It's 6 credits. You can't leave the university without it. Well, you can leave, but you'll leave without a degree, because it's the capstone, what we call the capstone of the program. And it's good for you to come and see, because from now you will be able to focus and be able to begin to look at what you will need for that practicum. And as you do your studies, you begin to focus with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. So I want to encourage you to come on Friday evening, because you'll be able to ask questions as well. And those students who are in second year are coming back again, because their practicum is now coming up. Practicum will start around June, Ms. Thomas? June?
No, April, May. It's right after the exams. Yes, it's right after the exams. Yeah.
Okay, it's starting earlier this year, and it goes on for 8 weeks.
Yes, 8 weeks, and then 1 week to just write up your documents, a polish up week.
Right. So
3 days a week for 8 weeks, and then you have a little write-up time.
And I am one of the practicum supervisors. So both staffing and performance management are practicums. Okay. So please, I suggest very strongly that you try and attend it. I think you'll find it extremely beneficial, because what you learn in the course is what you will have to demonstrate at practicum. So I think it will begin to give you a good understanding of your program overall.
So Miss, just
any questions before we leave?
Miss, regarding the practicum, it ends in July. July then? June?
Yes.
July, thank you.
And towards the end of July, yes, God's willing. And I'm glad we had a class this evening, because I had 2 power cuts today, and I was very nervous and asked the Lord, don't let us have a power cut tonight, because that's very difficult. I had 2 power cuts here at home today. So Any other questions?
Can you give an example of what the practicum is? Is it a business proposal? Is it what?
No, different practicums have different requirements, and this is why you should come on Friday, because in the presentation she's going to explain, or the presenters are going to explain what the practicum was and how they went about it, because different practicums have different outcomes depending on what the organization was and which one of the practicums you're doing, because there are about nine practicums, meaning 9 topics, nine course areas that can be reviewed for practicum. You select one. So there is the staffing, performance management, training, compensation, IT, research. What did I miss, Miss Thomas?
We had small business development and growth. That might have been why you were asking about that. But I sent out the course outlines that we used for last summer. So the people who will be speaking used these outlines. I didn't print anything new because I haven't discussed with the lecturers if any of them want to change their topic. But so you saw, at least you'll see what obtained in summer gone. But it shouldn't change too much, even if there is a change. Usually somebody might say, boy, I didn't do a research paper in my area, I'll offer something like that. So it's usually that they offer more, not less. So please come, you'll find it fascinating, and it will help to focus you in what you're doing, because you'll see what the end goal is of all these courses that you're doing. Because this is you entering an organization as a consultant and solving a problem for these people, and you do it alone. You have the lecturers in that you meet with them weekly, but it's not as if you have your group around you. You have to go into an organization as a consultant by yourself and execute on something that the people have asked you, they've contracted with you to do. So
and you're given guidance, you work with a practicum supervisor. So if it's performance management, you work with me for the 8 weeks. If it's staffing, you work with me for the 8 weeks, or whatever. You're given
you
guidance.
work with the lecturer who taught you the course, but they don't hold your hand in the way they do in the class. You are expected to demonstrate that you can apply the knowledge that you've gained over the 2 years with us. That really is what it is.
But you're given some tools to work with. You're given some tools to work with. And then you have weekly meetings that you come to, you know, and you discuss your challenges and whatever, and, you know.
Workshops. They're more workshops.
Yeah.
Will these workshops be face-to-face, or we're still referring to online?
Well, we don't know what will happen comes April, you know, just like the Ministry of Health is doing now. We are going along, you know, with the program. Last year, I had to do practicum totally online. And
they were online last year. The university did not want to ask students to do anything face-to-face.
Yeah, the organizations worked virtually with the students, and it worked out very well. You know, so unless something changes for COVID, you know, we have to continue.
Yeah, we're likely to have it online again.
Yeah. But you'll identify an organization, and, you know, you'll make contact with them, and you'll have a virtual relationship with them, and you'll most times develop some tools that you will send to the organization so you can gather the information that you need, etc., etc. But if you come on Friday, it will go a far way for you. Believe me, in thinking, and, you know, you even start to pinpoint which organization you'd like to look at, and, you know, be able to maybe even start developing a relationship, because we encourage you not to use your own organization.
You're not allowed to use your own organization.
No.
Could you use a past one?
Pardon me?
Can you use a former employee?
Yes. You can do that, as long as it's not the current one that you're in. We want you to go outside of your comfort zone.
No, but beyond that too, when the people know you, sometimes the results, the things that they tell you, are not true. They're hiding things, so you don't get an objective view of the organization. We've had students on the distinction track who failed because of the practicum, so it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as I said, come and listen, because these students aced it. You know, they did extraordinarily well, and the university is recognizing them for that.
Yeah. We don't have the time to present all of the practicum awardees, but we have selected 3, you know, to be able to have a cross section, because now that we're virtual, normally we would have a whole evening that you would come to face and, you know, and really have a good evening, but we have had to adjust some of these things. So because of the timing now, we're only presenting 3 of the practicums. Okay. Any other questions before we go? Can you
yes,
answer?
For the final, for next year, would it just be one practicum, or do we have to do practicum depending on the area of study, depending on the course?
You choose which one you want to do. There are 9 and you choose which one you'd like to do.
Okay.
Student chooses which practicum they'd like to engage in. You'll do 1 practicum. So you choose from the 9 which one you'd like to engage in.
I urge you to just look at those documents that I sent. They'll help to elucidate things for you.
Miss, sorry, is it this year, as in this year, or next year? Because I just want to be sure.
It's in 2nd year.
Okay, so
your practicum is your last set of courses. It's 6 credits of your program. It's the last 2 courses the last 2 activities that you will embark upon.
Okay, understood.
So
Thank you.
next year, April, you would be doing your practicum, because you'll be coming to the end of your 2 years. Correct?
Yes, miss. Thank you.
Okay. All right. You all stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Remember to do your readings, because next week it looks like I'm going to have to ask some questions, because this participation has to improve. So do your readings. As I said, this is a very important chapter. You need to read it, and at least read the one ahead of it as well. Okay? All right. Well, it was a pleasure to be with you again tonight, and I look forward to next week. Have a good rest of the week. Okay? Stay safe.
You too, miss.
Stay safe.
Good night, miss. Thank you, OMC.
Thanks, Miss Thomas. I have to go
bye.
sort out my share screen. I don't know what happened because the file is open, but I will have to try and figure it out.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, miss.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, miss.